we are starting to create a model that allows you to buy elastic bandwidth. So buy the bandwidth that you need, but every now and again you need to expand that bandwidth for whatever it is, a month in run, you're trying to do a data center replication or something like that. And people often ask us the question, over the last couple of weeks have been asking us, why do you want to build such a big system? We're not building such a big system for the total capacity on the system. We're building that system to allow us to get connectivity into the countries that we need to get connectivity into, without having to sacrifice the amount of bandwidth we deliver in that country. There's a uniqueness to running an infrastructure or a telco in Africa. 54 countries, 54 different regulations. Neighbors often don't talk to each other. And you can't get cross-border. And you'll find the price points are hugely different across neighboring countries and things like that.
Welcome to another edition of ITWeb TV. Today we are joined by Prenesh Padayachee, who is the Group Chief Digital Infrastructure Officer at Seacom. Welcome.
Thank you, Sam. Thanks for having me.
Good, pass. Mr. Padayachee, let's just start with the introduction of your view of the digital infrastructure on the continent. Let's start from there before we get into the crux of the matter, which is the data neutrality that you want to talk about.
Okay. So when I look at the infrastructure on the continent, I think I need to break it up into two areas. One is subsea infrastructure and the other one is terrestrial infrastructure. When we start to look at subsea infrastructure, I think we've made massive strides over the last sort of 2 to 3 years on bringing more subsea connectivity to the African continent. But we haven't solved the problem of how do we get the subsea connectivity to the areas where it needs to go to. If I take South Africa as an example, most of the connectivity needs to get to Johannesburg. The subsea connectivity either sits in KZN or sits in the Western Cape. So I think there needs to be more investment around terrestrial infrastructure to get it to where it needs to get to. But I also feel, and if you look at the analysis we've been doing at Seacom, lots of the infrastructure that exists today is aged infrastructure. South Africa is a great example of that. If you look at national long-distance networks, no new national long-distance networks have been built for a very long time now. If I go through other countries across the African continent, those networks were typical. The old telco in the region ran the network, and that network originally hasn't been invested in. And then there's sort of that changeover point now between copper infrastructure and fiber. Fortunately, in South Africa, we have an extensive fiber rollout, but it doesn't cover a significant portion of the population as well.
Okay. Now, let's move over to the issue why you're here, which is you recently wrote a paper on data neutrality 2, which you say it's Seacom's advantage. Can you briefly tell us more about that?
Yes, so Sam, the way we see it at Seacom is, so data centers have become a necessity across all industries. Lots of people move into the cloud. Many organizations previously used to have what they considered a data center, but by and large it was a machine room that hosted a couple of servers and things like that. And I think with the advent of data centers, or the explosion rather of data centers across the African continent, what's starting to happen now is there's much more trust in data centers than there were previously. The cost points to host in a data center are much lower than they were previously as well. This has now kind of prompted people into, do I host on site or do I put it into a data center? And here I'm not just talking about do I put it into public cloud or not, because that's a different sort of discussion. It's important to this discussion, but a different one. So as people move into data centers, they also want to have the ability then to have some sort of redundancy in what they do in a data center. But from a Seacom perspective, and specifically under Seacom infrastructure, we provide that underlying infrastructure to connect to the data center. It's all fine and well to host at a data center, but if you can't connect out of the data center, you have a different sort of problem or different issues to deal with. So that's why this data center neutrality thing for us is important. And when you look at the investments that we made and you look at the sort of portfolio of services that we have, you'll see in our portfolio of services, we don't have a data center per se portfolio. We use generally carrier neutral data centers that we put connectivity into. And that allows us then to be a seamless provider of connectivity, not just in South Africa, but across the African continent, because those data centers then connect directly onto the Seacom backbone, and we can move your data to wherever you want to.
Okay. Moving on, in your opinion that you wrote, you mentioned about hyperscale economy, and you say connectivity alone is not enough, and you're saying enterprise and cloud providers are looking for something more. What is it that they're looking for?
So when I talk about looking for something more, it's not just the connectivity space. It's the reliability of the connectivity space. It's the trust around the connectivity space. And then another thing that you'll see in the article I've written about as well is a concept that we call 100% tradability. Yeah. Because for us, it's not just about having the link up and running. Can you actually use that connectivity for the purpose that you bought the connectivity? So as an example, if you wanted to connect to a public cloud environment somewhere in the world, and your connectivity is up in South Africa, but you can't get to the end cloud provider, that doesn't make any difference in your life. So you can't really use the connectivity for that. So when we start to talk about these things about hyperscale economy, it's about the end-to-end service. Do you trust the provider that you use? Do they have a sufficient network coverage or sufficient network capability to take you wherever in the world you need to go to, either on their own network or through strong partnerships with other providers? And you'll find that in this sort of economy and this industry, you have to have strong partnerships to get to wherever you want to in the world. And then the third part to that is, can you actually use the connectivity for the reason that you bought it?
Yeah. No, thank you very much. Earlier on, when we started the conversation, we spoke about data centers, which is part of our discussion. What is the approach that Seacom is taking towards the data center economy?
So that approach for us is multifaceted. One is it's around elastic connectivity. And what do I mean by elastic connectivity? So typically you find that connectivity today is bought in a fashion, you buy a 10 meg link all the way to 100 or 400 gig link, and that's the link that you're stuck with. But you may find that you don't actually use that link all the time. It's for specific applications that you need that higher connectivity. But because of the models that we have, not just in South Africa, but globally today, you buy a piece of connectivity at a particular speed, and that's the speed you get to use. If it's economically viable for you, what you would do is you'd buy at the highest speed, although you're not going to use the highest speed all the time. Yeah. We are starting to create a model that allows you to buy elastic bandwidth. So buy the bandwidth that you need, but every now and again you need to expand that bandwidth for whatever it is, a month in run, you're trying to do a data center replication or something like that. Have the ability or have the network that you run on, then scale and adapt to your requirements for that particular point in time, and then scale it back when you don't need it. So that's the one area that we're looking at. The second area that we're looking at is, and you'll see multiple stats on this, and if you kind of just read through the various articles, lots of people are building data centers across Africa and across the world. Data centers are kind of the must-need thing, whether you're talking AI or just plain hosting. What you will find then is, on the Seacom network, for where we operate, and primarily between sort of East Africa and Southern Africa, at some stage we'll move to West Africa, all the data centers that have come up, all the major data centers that have come up, we connect them directly onto the Seacom network, or we have a Seacom point of presence in that data center. That gives us then the flexibility on giving you connectivity between multiple data centers. So you don't have to then sit with one data center provider in a country. And you'll find that, and if I take some examples, you'll find some of the data center providers in South Africa only operate in South Africa. Some of the other data center providers operate across 2 or 3 different countries. But then if I take all of these data center providers together, I get a massive footprint on the ability to service. Then when you start to get Pan-African or global clients that host in different countries, if we the underlying provider, we then have the ability for them to seamlessly move data between data centers, have one sort of pricing model, have this elastic bandwidth and all of those types of things. That gives them flexibility. We take away the pain then of the data centers that you connect to. And you can connect to the one that's relevant to you, 2, the one that's most cost effective to you, and maybe 3, where you have staff on the ground or things like that make it relevant to you.
Thank you. You talk about the explosion of data centers on the continent, and You also explained what data neutrality is all about. Why does it matter right now more than ever for data neutrality?
I think that matters for two reasons. One is we're starting to see an uplift on data sovereignty in various countries. It's becoming legislation in various countries. So therein lies an issue of the data for that country needs to sit in that country. So how do you facilitate that? So if I take a multinational that's got offices in 7 or 8 countries in Africa, if 5 of those countries have a data center, data sovereignty requirement, they will then have to have 5 data centers to be able to keep their data in. How do you deal with one provider in that sort of scenario? And that solves one of the issues. The other one around from a neutrality perspective and what it's solving, or the explosion of data centers, that sort of flexibility, because you get varying power, varying cooling in all of these data centers. It also solves that issue for you, where you need the high-speed computing and high-power computing. You could be in one particular data center where you don't need those facilities. You can be in a cheaper facility. And those are kind of the economics that bring it all together.
Yeah. And at Seacom, how are you guys taking advantage of neutrality, data center neutrality? There's an advantage for you to be competing with your peers, or maybe to leapfrog it.
Primarily from the footprint that we have and the fact that we connect to all these data centers, we connect in an elastic fashion to all these data centers. So whether you wanted a 100 gig link into the data center or 1 gig link in the data center, we can facilitate that for you. And it's a seamless model for us on whichever country that you're in. The only thing you have to then take care of is whatever the last mile connectivity options are. And with us being a Pan-African network, and remember, we run a Pan-African network and we have access to subsea. So we solve 2 issues for you. The other thing that we also solve is we're not just a Pan-African network, we're a global network. But we were born sort of on the African continent in 2009 with our subsea cable on the east coast of Africa. So we understand that market very well. We have then grown further into the African market over the last 15 years, but also grown into the global market. And I think what makes it really unique and what Seacom has the advantages that we understand the countries that we operate in, 54 countries in Africa, of which we operate in 7 and partner relationships in other ones. We understand the regulatory environment, we understand the sort of economics on the ground, we understand the providers on the ground. We also understand those factors in the global market. So the uniqueness, we have the ability, because we understand the uniqueness of operating a telco in Africa and how to integrate that telco in Africa into a global market. That's where the big difference comes in from Seacom. And the fact that we own and manage the underlying infrastructure, both on a subsea level as well as a terrestrial level, gives us a huge advantage on how we do this.
Interesting. And as we move on, what important role do you see data centers playing in shaping Africa's digital economy?
I think they will become those sort of nuggets of concentration points, not just for data storage, but for data processing. They'll also give us the ability, and this is a very interesting stat, which I think we don't debate enough.
Yeah.
Roughly between 70 and 80% of Africa's content leaves the continent to come back to the continent. And that's the catalyst for that, or the sort of primary driver for that, is the fact that our terrestrial connectivity isn't where it should be. So because lots of countries had subsea connectivity, they all connected to Europe, it was easier just to connect to your neighboring country in Europe than to try and run a cross-border link. So that impact of data centers then allows us to keep the content in Africa. It also gives us the ability then, as we move on and start to move down the AI road and all of those sort of areas, it gives us the ability to then process in country or process on the continent, be it in sort of regions in the continent, East African, West African, Southern African region, whatever the regions are. We then don't have to rely on large language models that come from other areas. In the future, we have the ability to create our own large language models. And if you just look at the social media and the movie industry in Africa, that's starting to grow quite rapidly as well. You'll then store all that content in Africa. The other area that I think is vitally important is the fact that Africa has the youngest population, and we will have the youngest population for a long time to come. That population will be the population that will be online more than anyone else. So if these data centers, or when these data centers do come online, it then brings the content that those, for one, that population size is creating, it keeps it on the continent. It also then, the content that they are seeking gets cached on the continent itself in these data centers, which then allows us to do a whole bunch more with that content. I think the third area for that, or the fourth area for that, is as gaming starts to become a reality for that sort of young population, specifically online gaming, having the gaming servers in these data centers on the continent become important.
What are some of the key trends that you're seeing within the African data center market?
I think over the last while, I've seen a trend of building data centers that have larger capabilities, not larger in size, but larger capability from a power perspective, from a cooling perspective, all of those sort of areas. I've also seen a trend of footprint size on a server basis reducing, so it allows you to pack more into a data center itself. And then I'm starting to see, I suppose I can describe them as hybrid data center models, where data centers allow you to be in a particular section of a data center, and then those characteristics of what you're looking for, the amount of power you want per rack, the amount of cooling you want per rack, are delivered to that particular space. Previously we used to have data centers where everything gets flooded. You had 3 kilowatts per rack. It was the same amount of cooling through the entire data center. I think between the hot aisle and cold aisle cooling concept that's been around for quite some time, I see that intensify now. But that hybrid sort of model of a multi-use type data center, I think, is the best way I can describe it. You can decide kind of in a certain area how much of power and cooling you want, and the data center builders have the ability to adapt their models to be able to deliver that for you. I think we'll see more of that coming along. I do think we'll see more larger data centers also coming online. And I think the third or fourth factor in there would be data centers will start moving to much more renewable energy to power certain aspects of the data center.
Okay, thank you. Let's look at just the African market and digital transformation. I think at the rate it is growing, it's creating opportunities for investors and companies like Seacom. Where do you see the opportunities for you within this area of the digital transformation that's taking place at Seacom?
I see it in areas around I'll talk about two areas of Seacom. So Seacom Digital Services, which is by and large our enterprise business, and Seacom Digital Infrastructure. On the digital infrastructure business, the way I see that is, as digital transformation comes online, you'll find that cloud-first technologies become much more relevant to these organizations, which then necessitates having the connectivity to get to those types of services required, be it on the African continent or be it elsewhere in the world. And I think that sort of will start to shift over time. So I think that would be one of the key areas. To get a true digitally transformed organization, you have to have robust connectivity to be able to do that, because your services are digitized. You're not going to host your services in your local premises. You're going to host it in the cloud somewhere. And reality there is you'll build it once and use it many times over.
Yeah.
The other part of digital transformation is, as these digital transformation sort of journeys start to evolve, you will start to see AI coming into those journeys. So where does that information sit? How do you use AI for your digital transformation journey? How do you use it to improve your client service capabilities and those sort of areas? How do you use it for root cause analysis? So those things become important at an infrastructure level. Allow people to get to those end destinations as cost effectively and as quickly as they can. So that's the digital infrastructure. When I look at our digital services business, building over and above that infrastructure layer, we then start to see, and at Seacom we have this philosophy, build it internally for our own use, and if it works for our own use, then take it externally for other organizations to use. So you'll see that Seacom's on a digital transformation journey as well, and that digital transformation starts off with, what do we do as an organization to digitally transform, which will enhance our client experience, will enhance our ability to on how we operate networks, how we deliver services, how we roll out product. So in the digital services business, you'll see that's kind of inculcated into what we do as well. And that then becomes a blueprint and a model that we will take to other organizations, say, look, this is what we do internally. This is how we have digitally transformed. This is what we've done in various aspects. And those aspects could be around pure cloud and hosting services, around cybersecurity, on client management, various aspects. And what we do internally, then we package those and take it externally. And I think in Seacom, we're in a fortunate position because we have both organizations. So from a digital infrastructure perspective, digital services becomes an internal friendly client, if you want to call it that, because then we can kind of test scenarios with them and things like that. On the flip side of that, digital infrastructure also becomes a friendly supplier to digital services. As much as we operate across various sectors, they become a friendly client because then they can incubate new services that they're trying and the ability to deliver these services. So when they do talk to other digital infrastructure providers in various other territories that digital services operate in, they understand what they're looking for, they understand what the capability is, because we've already created it internally.
You kind of preempted my next question. Anyway, you touched it a little bit. I wanted to talk about the impact of emerging technologies such as AI, machine learning, and all. How are they impacting, or how are you taking advantage of these emerging technologies to grow your business?
So let me talk about how they're impacting and then how we're taking advantage. So how they're impacting is we need to fundamentally change how we designed networks previously. Our networks previously were very traditionally designed on look at areas that people want connectivity to and then deliver that connectivity. And by and large is branch connectivity. Improve metro connectivity in various areas, make sure that the bandwidth will be at a sufficient level and have the ability to deliver that. The way I see that and the way we've seen that changing is that whole elasticity in bandwidth. You can't really predict where the bandwidth's going to go to, but then you need to have underlying infrastructure that allows you to scale quickly when bandwidth is required quickly. Whether it's kind of, you need to move this to a subsea load, you may need to move it to a different metro in the country, you need to move it to a different data center. So we've started for a while now investing in infrastructure that allows us to scale quickly. So as an example, in certain parts of our network today, we deliver 400 gig capability. In our next iteration, we'll deliver 800 gig capability. But there isn't many clients out there today that require 400 gig on a regular daily basis. They're required for certain periods in time. So that sort of elasticity, that's what we do in that in that space. So that's how we're taking care of the infrastructure parts of it. The second part of the question was?
Talk about how you are taking advantage of it.
And then, so from a digital services perspective, I spoke around, we incubate those things internally. And you spoke about AI. So what we do from an AI perspective as well is we start to use AI models. We start to look at where AI loads are moving towards. And then we make sure that we create the shortest paths or shortest distances between the user and where those models reside. Now, those models are moving around all over the place at the moment. But the reality is there are starting to be hotspots in the world where these large language models are. And typically it's areas where there will be sufficient power, there will be sufficient cooling. And there's sort of three emerging sort of areas. There's these new AI data centers coming up that Google is looking at building, which is public knowledge now in India. They're looking at building in Malaysia to service that sort of Eastern market. Europe's kind of been a big area for a long time, but I suppose it all started off in the US and particularly in the Virginia area where all of these large DCs reside today. So if you get connectivity to all of those areas, you'll then have the ability, I suppose, to utilize the large language models. But you still need to have the ability, and this is when sort of the concepts of MCP and all of those sort of things come on board, because the large language models are good, except that if they don't have like RAG and MCP as the protocols, they can't get access to the live data. So then you want to create secondary or arterial routes that allow you to then connect to the live data, which enhances the large language models anyway. So we're starting to look at those sort of areas now on AI and how do we create a diverse enough network that shortens the distance between the user and the endpoint that they're trying to get.
You have a strong continental footprint and a large number of clients, I think, that you deal with. Do you think there's an appreciation of what you're trying to do with emerging technologies to enhance those businesses?
I think that to a degree there is. But I think because it's such an uncertain area, because if you look at those AI models, yes, lots of them use it. What's the true business case of AI today? I think that's still out for debate. But I definitely think there's an appreciation because, for one, we kind of keep our client base informed. We also take a lot of sort of feedback from the client base on what challenges do they face, how do they see themselves solving these, and can we solve it for them. So one of these sort of areas that pushed us into the whole elastic bandwidth area was from a client requirement that says, I need X amount of bandwidth. The only models I can get only allows me to buy this bandwidth on a monthly basis, and I don't use it for the entire month. I use it for a couple of days. So those are the sort of areas. So we work quite closely and across various sectors, be it financial services, be it mining, be it retail. So, and we're fortunate we've got clients in all of the sectors, and we've got a large amount of clients in all of these sectors. So we've got a broad base of sort of client base that we can go out to and understand what the real world problems are out there. And then we can kind of verticalize and go and create solutions for those particular sectors. So financial services is an example. Low latency trading is a great sort of benefit to them. So how do we shorten the distance between the trading houses and kind of from where they come from? Those are sort of areas that we look at. There's a very interesting area that's developing now, which will become commercially available probably only in 2 years from now. Hollow core fiber is a great area to look at. Hollow core fiber gives us lowest latency, but it's not commercially available. But we're already starting to look at those technologies to allow us to do those when they do come out.
We spoke about the rapid digital transformation taking place on the continent, which is attracting investors across the world and locally as well, including yourselves. Where are some of the areas that you see opportunities for yourself where you're going to put money? And in the last 5 years, what kind of investments have you guys made to try and contribute to the Africa's digital future?
So you would have seen our announcement on Seacom 2.0, which would be a massive project over the next couple of years. And the primary reason for that project is we do see the opportunity and the requirement for much more bandwidth on the African continent. So that's kind of a key area that we think. So one of the things that we'll see in our 5-year journey and our 5-year plan is to roll out Seacom 2.0. It's a critical cornerstone of our development going forward. We're not just looking at that though. As I mentioned earlier on, terrestrial connectivity is a problem. So we're coupling whatever we do from a subsea perspective, and we're enhancing our terrestrial network as well. And those are for the countries that we operate in. As we expand to other countries, you'll find that we will do that much more as well. And when we say on-net, we talk about a couple of things in on-net. Whether it's our own dark fiber, whether we've built our own dark fiber, we lease dark fiber from someone, or we get spectrum from someone. As long as we have the ability to control what we do on that fiber, we have the ability to then put whatever equipment we want to on the end of it. We have the ability to light up whatever capacity we want on it and things like that. So those are sort of the areas that we're looking at from an investment perspective. But that just covers what we do at a network layer, building out telecoms infrastructure. Over and above that, we're starting to use AI tools, and we're busy with these now, on how do we manage that infrastructure. So a couple of areas that we're looking at. We want to be a little bit ahead of the curve here. So we're starting to invest and look at technologies that do optical sensing on fiber. So we want to have the ability to say, there is someone digging within X meters of our fiber. Let's send someone out before they cut the fiber. So we're starting to bring that intelligence into the network itself. We're also starting to use some AI tools that allow us to do proper root cause analysis. So from a client experience perspective, what you'll find with us going forward is that we would be able to tell you very quickly, this is sort of the issue that we have. These are all the clients that are affected with this issue, and this is kind of what we see as a possible repair time, or how do we automatically reroute all this traffic or something like that. So those are sort of the key areas, much more intelligence from an AI perspective in the network itself, physically building out more network infrastructure so we get it to the relevant regions in all of that. And that's across all technologies. So what you'll find in our 5-year plan is we will look at wireless technologies, wired technologies, non-terrestrial technologies like satellite and things like that. I know as much as satellite has been said, it's kind of on its way out. I don't think satellite's on its way out for a long time to come. from the mere fact that we have so many sort of unconnected areas in Africa, and satellite's the only way to get there. Fiber will take a long time to get there. So we're looking at all of these technologies, bundling it together into one sort of ubiquitous solution to solve a connectivity problem. Over and above that, we're investing in tools and methodologies that allow us to maintain that network at a cost-effective level and plan at a cost-effective level. And then we also want to start to give the ability to second-tier providers, regional providers, for lack of better terminology, regional providers to create their own network on our network. So they don't have to go and build out that infrastructure, but they can still have a layoff network that has its own characteristics of whatever they've determined, and that would be a Pan-African play as well. So over the 5 years, that's what you'll see come out of Seacom, that sort of future-looking technologies, high-speed bandwidth, elastic bandwidth, building wherever we need to build.
And what's your view about the fiber market in general? And do you think the fiber still has a future?
Yeah, I think as long as we continue to grow the consumer market in Africa and the SMME market in Africa, there'll still be a place for fiber. I do think fiber will work very closely with fixed wireless access technologies, but as much as you may have those technologies as a last mile connectivity medium, you'll still need fiber from the aggregation point as backhaul and things like that. Because there aren't technologies today that exist that allow you to aggregate large amounts of bandwidth and bring it into central areas, whether it's a data center or data center neutrality, it's whether it's taking it to a different continent via subsea cable, but you still have to have that ability to aggregate that capacity, and fiber is the only way to do that. Whether we'll get large rollouts of last mile fiber in underserviced areas, I think that will take a long time to come in. I think it's purely because the economics for that don't make sense just yet. But I do think it will become a reality in time.
Just to subsea cables, I think you recently announced a new cable. Can you share with us more about it?
Yeah, absolutely. So on the Seacom 2.0 announcement that we made a couple of weeks ago, so the Seacom 1, the original Seacom cable, has gone through multiple upgrades. It was built in 2009, and that cable will probably retire in 2035. That's the typical lifespan of subsea cables. After that point, it becomes economically unviable to maintain these cables anyway. So the reason for this thrust and push for Seacom 2.0 is, one, we do see that there'll be a lack of bandwidth on the continent. Two, if you just look at subsea cable maps around the world, what you'll see is that the Indian Ocean basin is by and large devoid of subsea cables. If you look at all the other oceans, there's multiple cables all over the place, which then restricts Africa's ability to connect to the rest of the world. So we want to solve that problem with that. And then the other thing that we want to solve is, and you'll find that, and we made this in the announcement as well, we're building a 48-pay cable. But if you look at sort of subsea cables today, in long-distance subsea cables, there isn't a 48-pay cable system that exists today. So we're trying to build something new here. And people often ask us the question, over the last couple of weeks, they've been asking us, why do you want to build such a big system? We're not building such a big system for the total capacity on the system. We're building that system to allow us to get connectivity into the countries that we need to get connectivity into without having to sacrifice the amount of bandwidth we deliver in that country. Because you'll find lots of the subsea cables that are deployed, whether it's a 24-pay cable system or a 3-pay cable system, not all the capacity on the cable has the ability to be delivered in the country itself. Now here we won't deliver all the capacity in each country, but we'll have the ability to deliver significant amounts of capacity in each of the countries that we land in. And that's primarily the reason for it. So we're solving what we believe is an connectivity problem in the Indian Ocean basin in the forthcoming years, because if you look at the young population globally, 70% of that population by 2050 will live in around the Indian Ocean basin. That's the sort of generation that's moving connectivity forward, or the largest consumer of connectivity. So we're looking at that as one of the factors. The second factor is there is no large cable system that's being built across the African coastline. There are cables that have come online, but those cables, if I just look at bandwidth growth in Africa, and these are across various publications, for the next 5 years, it's predicted that bandwidth in Africa will grow 40% year on year. If you look at other places in the world, it only grow between 10 and sort of 15% year on year. So it's a major growth area. So that capacity that we have today, for one, won't suffice. Two, all that capacity that we've had land on the continent doesn't necessarily land in all the countries. So we're solving that issue with this Seacom 2.0 cable. And then the other area is, if you look at the sort of economic zones that we're delivering the cable to, we see those as sort of hotspot economic areas in the future. So that's why we're... So like if you look in the East, Singapore is a great example of this. One of the new AI data centers will come up in Malaysia, just across the border from Singapore. So we either land in Singapore or Malaysia, which then gives us the ability to get access to that AI content going forward. India is another great example of it. Google's made an announcement of, I think it's a $10 billion investment in a data center in India. So we're covering those areas as well. And if you start to look at those economies, and by and large, they're sort of developing economies, I suppose, by Singapore, those developing economies, we then see those economies starting to really drive connectivity requirements and connectivity needs.
Thank you. As we conclude, I just wanted to get a sense of
how Seacom sees itself contributing to the Africa's digital infrastructure going forward. What are near-term plans as you are sitting here?
So near-term plans for us are, one is make sure that the infrastructure we have today becomes more resilient and more robust. What you'll find in lots of the countries that we operate in, there's a lot of construction going on. As a result, lots of cables get cut. So we're starting to build, in most areas you look at sort of dual route redundancy. We're starting to look at 3 and 4 routes in certain areas. So the base for us is, let's get more redundancy into the network. Coupled with that, we're starting to look at, or we have been looking at for quite some time, and we've rolled out the ability to deliver large capacities in specific areas in a short period of time. The third area that we look at then is, how do we take where capacity lands to where it needs to get to? So those are the areas that we're investing in from an infrastructure perspective. Robustness of the network, getting the destinations closer to the end user, building more resiliency into the network itself to accommodate for growing economies where there's lots of construction going on and things like that. So those are sort of the key areas. And we find that, we think, will be key to the sort of digital upliftment of Africa. Seacom's strapline is connecting Africa or enabling Africa for a digitally connected future. And that we kind of live that every day. Everything that we do, every product that we roll out kind of hems on that or hangs on that philosophy for us. And it has been for a long time. If you look at what we did in 2009, it was a key driver to get cost-effective internet access to the east coast of Africa, which I think we proved. And you'll see multiple articles on this, on what percentage we dropped the internet access connectivity by. And we'll continue to do that as we continue. And I think it's really important because we grew up in Africa, we understand Africa. And this is kind of where our roots are. But it doesn't mean that we won't expand globally, because we've had access and we operate in that global market as well. But as I said previously, there's a uniqueness to running an infrastructure or a telco in Africa. 54 countries, 54 different regulations. Neighbors often don't talk to each other. And you can't get cross-border. And you'll find the price points are hugely different across neighboring countries and things like that. But because we understand all of those things, it puts us in a unique position to be able to deal with those hurdles and then move forward. If I go to Europe, whatever country I buy a link in, the price will vary between 5%. That's pretty much it. But when I look in Africa, between two countries, I can get a 500% variance in cost. So how do you smooth those types of things out for the markets that you work in? Because both those countries are probably still going to the same destination in Europe or the US or the East. Yeah. So we have the ability, because we've got the experience in Africa, to smooth those things out. And that's how we deal with it. So that's what you'll see come out of Seacom.
Yeah. Just to follow up on the issue of regulations, it's been a hurdle for many companies, and lots of discussion has come up around that. Some calling for harmonized kind of regulatory framework. Do you agree? Or what can be done to try and ease, how companies can quickly develop their infrastructure to try and make sure that Africa is at par with the rest of the world?
I'm not so sure if the harmonized framework is the right answer here. And I'll tell you why. Because if you look at lots of these countries, they're competing with each other as well. So they're also trying to attract FDI and all of those sort of areas. They also want to build these large data centers. They understand that the hyperscalers have a lot to spend, so they want to make their country more lucrative to be able to. So I don't think harmonizing is the right answer in that. What I do think, though, is lower the barriers to entry is maybe the answer to this in those particular countries. Because I think if you look at it in a united bloc, whether it's the sort of Southern African bloc, East African bloc, whichever bloc you look at, I think it'll uplift the entire region rather than just uplifting one of the countries. So I think it's fine to have your own regulations in each of the countries. But then I think when it comes to certain aspects, cross-border connectivity as an example, and it doesn't have to be harmonized across all the countries in the region, but the countries that kind of talk to each other, or that border that you're talking about, harmonize those sort of areas. Don't make it extremely difficult to get from one end to the other. The other area that I think is important, I think this will take a long time to come to fruition, is to make a concerted effort to break down the telco monopolies that still exist in some of the countries. That's the difficult part, I think. I think it's fine having all the regulation that we have. There's different requirements for different countries. But then when you start to look at foreign investment in those countries, I think there needs to be models that allow foreigners to invest if they're solving a problem for the country. If they're not solving a problem for the country and they're just in to make a quick buck, then I think it's the wrong idea.
Lastly, as a veteran in the industry, I'll give you the opportunity to share your final thoughts about the digital future of the continent and how Seacom will be contributing going forward.
So for me, digital future of the continent will be, we will see loads more activity on the continent, driven primarily by the population and the age group of the population that we have. That needs to be coupled with affordable devices to be able to utilize that connectivity and affordability of connectivity to enable that. I do also think so. And so what is Seacom doing? We try every day to lower those cost points and lower the barriers of entry to that. I also think that we need to start building a mindset of, a few years ago, now as you said, I've been in this industry a very long time. Previously, we used to look at things and use the evaluation criteria that people didn't have connectivity previously, so it's fine to just give them connectivity. I don't think it's about that anymore. Now we have to deliver reliable connectivity to those areas that are unserved. We can't just deliver connectivity. And what you'll find is that, and there's multiple standards around there, to kind of put in a fiber network, you need standards anyway. A simple standard is how deep do you bury the fiber. But what you'll find is, and this is it's fortunate and unfortunate, lots of construction companies have become fiber rollout companies. And when you dig for a foundation, it's not the same as digging for a fiber. It's not the same as digging a fiber trench. So you can't dig a foundation trench and think you're going to put fiber in it. This is where you start to cause problems, and this is where the reliability of the network starts to come in. So I think if we start to harmonize what we do on the delivery side of it, on the construction side of it, and make the right investments up front on robust infrastructure, fiber will last us many years to come. The capacity requirements, and fiber enables large capacity because that technology will change. So I think fiber is the right way to go. It gives us longevity in what we're starting to look for. But I do think we need to then have a focused approach on delivering fiber to the right areas. And I'm not saying deliver fiber to every home. There's other sort of complementary technologies. deliver fiber to an area that allows you to roll out Wi-Fi to all the homes in the area. They don't necessarily have to have a fixed connection to the fiber, but they need to be close enough to get access to the fiber. So I think if we start to solve those problems, we'll definitely... and Seacom is an enabler to lots of those. Whether you're a Wi-Fi aggregator, we have products that allow you to do that. Whether you're looking for subsea connectivity on a private line basis, we have the ability to do that. Whether you're looking for connectivity between data centers, we have the ability to do that. So we have a whole portfolio of services that addresses these issues. But I think we need to come together as an industry. And you'll probably see this in the article as well. So we talk about co-opetition in the article. Yeah. And what we find is you don't necessarily have to build out the fiber to deliver a service. It's a kind of common misconception. I have to own the fiber to be able to deliver a service. It's beneficial if you own the fiber, but there's many other ways to do that. And I also think we need to get to a level of maturity on everyone doesn't have to build fiber in the same area. Spread out where you build fiber and swap fiber with each other. And compete on the level of the service that you offer, not the fact that you own the fiber.
Thank you so much, Prenesh, for coming through. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for watching this episode of ITWeb. Please subscribe and join the discussion. Thank you.